Hi, everyone. My name is Christian Lane. I am founder and host of the Team 10-8 podcast and team108.com. It is my honor to be here today to interview two very special individuals, one of whom you'll probably recognize. I'm joined by Mark Burchell, who is one of the national co-founders of the Canadian Walk for Veterans, and Randie Scott, who is a 35-year member of Correctional Services Canada and spent some time in Afghanistan, and we'll get into that in just a little bit. Mark, the first thing I want to do is ask you a little bit about the walk. What is the Canadian Walk for Veterans, and why is it so important to Canadians?
Well, the Canadian Walk for Veterans is an opportunity for Canadians to walk shoulder to shoulder with those in our country who have served, made sacrifices, and spent time away from their families in service to our country. So it's about recognizing their contribution to our Canadian way of life. You know, when we talk about veterans, the word veteran generally conjures up images of somebody from the Second World War, the First World War, or the Korean War, from a previous generation. And people tend to forget that the longest war we ever fought in was the Afghan War. And it's all younger, well, I shouldn't say all, but it's a lot of younger veterans. And in fact, I work with a lot of young veterans, and very often people say to them, how come you have veteran plates on your car? Is that your grandfather's car?
Right.
And, we have to remind them that we have a whole new generation of veteran, and they have sacrificed and contributed to Canada just like the previous generation. So we founded the Canadian Walk for Veterans 5 years ago.
Wow.
And it has just grown amazingly. We started off in 7 cities across the country, and then we went to 10, and then COVID hit. And then all of a sudden, we can't do the walk. So we had to reinvent ourselves, and so we held a virtual walk across the country. And it was actually the silver lining around the COVID cloud, because what it allowed us to do is have walkers in 152 cities across the country.
Wow, 152 cities.
Yeah, so we went from 10 cities to 152 cities. So now this year, we're very pleased to be able to be back in business, back having in-person events. So as I mentioned, we're in 11 cities across the country to start out this year, all the way from Courtenay, BC on Vancouver Island to the East Coast in Halifax.
So coast to coast, truly a national event.
And points in between.
So how did it get started, Mark? Tell me a little bit about who came together to found this, and why it was so important to bring this organization to light.
Well, it actually started, I was president of Equita Society at one time, and Equita Society was formed to fund a class action lawsuit against the Canadian government to try to achieve parity with the Pension Act that was replaced by the new Veterans Charter in 2006.
Okay.
So the new Veterans Charter, I think everybody thought it was a good idea at the time, but very quickly it determined that it wasn't a good idea. And it was shortchanging veterans in terms of their compensation, injured veterans. So, for example, they replaced the Pension Act, which was a lifelong pension, with lump sum payments, and the lump sum payments were totally inadequate. So anyways, we held the first walk as an Equita Society fundraiser in one location in Central Park in Burnaby. And, we thought maybe we'd get 75 people out, or 80 or 100 maybe. And we got close to 200 people out.
Wow.
And we had all the media there, Global, CTV, CBC, everybody was there. And it struck me that this resonated with people. And I learned that, we may have differences in the way we feel about, religion and politics and, lots of differences. But if there's one thing that Canadians are completely unified on, it's we got to look after our veterans. And they all have a soft spot for our military veterans. So, I was assisted by a number of young veterans who helped form the first walk, and then Chance Burles, my co-founder and co-national organizer in Edmonton, he stepped forward and thought, we need to grow this to many cities, and so we've been working on it together right from the beginning.
And Chance is an Afghanistan veteran himself, is he not?
Chance is an Afghan. He was one of the engineers. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So I understand that every year there's a theme to each walk and a message sort of behind that theme. What's the theme for this year's walk?
So on the back of our coin, it says kind of in a few short words what the theme is, and the theme is leave no one behind. And so this year, as well as our veterans, we're paying tribute to those who worked shoulder to shoulder with our veterans overseas.
Right.
And right now we've seen a lot, like it's a year's anniversary since Canada pulled out of Afghanistan, and a lot of the people that worked with us were left behind: interpreters, cultural advisors, lots of civilians that actually were employed and worked side by side with our veterans. And in fact, they played a major role in keeping our veterans safe, or our military are serving, keeping them safe and secure. So, and it's not just Afghanistan. I mean, we've had these people with us in all the conflicts that Canada's Somalia, Rwanda, Bosnia, Afghanistan, and all of our peacekeeping missions. So you know what, we just felt that with the high profile that certainly has happened now with the ones that were left behind in Afghanistan, we needed to take a moment and, as well as recognize the contribution of our veterans, recognize the backup team that was there to support them and keep them safe and healthy and work. And their contribution to our effort has actually contributed to our military, but also, again, to our Canadian way of life. So this year, it's about paying tribute to those locally employed people who worked shoulder to shoulder with our troops overseas.
And it's not just military veterans that these cultural advisors and interpreters and drivers and other Afghan personnel and not just Afghanistan, as you heard Mark say. It's not just the military, the soldiers, the Canadian Armed Forces and our allies that they were helping, but also civilian organizations who had employees deployed to these hotspots, including Afghanistan. And that's a pretty good segue to you, Randie. You were in Afghanistan for a year. When was that?
I went over there initially in very early 2008 in order to carry out technical assistance with a team of experts in corrections, policing, diplomatic affairs, as well as, at that time, a very hot topic, which was torture.
Wow. Okay. So, what was your role? Because you were with Corrections Canada, Correctional Services Canada. So, what was your role there?
My particular role, as part of the initial assessment, was technically assessing all of the physical facilities for the prison, the Afghan federal prisons, as well as the detention and lockup centers operated by the National Directorate of Security. That's the Afghan security forces at the secret police at the time, if you will.
Okay, and so I have to imagine, I think when Canadians and people from Western nations think of prisons, probably think a lot about what you'd see on television, sterile environments and that sort of thing. What was your first impression of the prison system in Afghanistan? I imagine it was quite different from what we all might expect would be a normal-looking prison.
It was dramatically different from anything that I'd ever encountered before. The prison structure, the buildings, and all of the facilities, the equipment, supplies, procedures, etc., were all carried over from probably a generation before, and that had fallen into disuse and abuse and neglect all through the Russian invasion, and then the time of the Mujahideen when they reclaimed the country, subject to the NATO involvement just after 9/11. The facilities needed to be drastically refurbished, and in order to do that, we had to understand exactly at what stage things were at, what needed to be done, who needed to do it, how long it might take, and what it might cost, and what the challenges may be that would be involved in that. Along with the challenges of assessing the physical infrastructure, we also had to look at all of the aspects of prison administration, including training, hiring, security procedures, population control, escorting, just everything that would be involved in managing a prison on a day-to-day basis. And throughout all of that, myself and my team had as a primary overriding or an overarching responsibility to help to teach human rights and the respect for law, and to help Afghanistan to begin to adhere to the minimum standards for the treatment of prisoners according to the UN document. And to that end, we had to develop and deliver training programs for all of the staff, from entry-level staff all the way to the senior prison administration, and to help them to translate their new constitution and their new federal laws into practical terms of how the prison would operate. So helping them to devise their own policies for the operations and also the procedures and protocols to put those policies into practice, and to develop the training, deliver it to the staff, and all the time gear ourselves towards identifying really remarkable Afghans who were adept at learning and wanting to begin to become trainers. Our vision was always that we would train individuals who would be able to take over what we were beginning and look after it. And more they took over, the more we took a step back. So we helped them to redevelop and rebuild many different portions of the prison and other lockups as well. And in doing so, we paid attention to making it a better place to work and to live for all of the staff that worked in there, the prison staff, as well as for the inmates. And there was a very wide-ranging population of people that had been detained within the institution. We had adult male convicted criminals. We had adult males who were detainees, the Taliban who had been captured in the battlefield, if you will, and were into custody of various NATO forces, but then were turned over to the Afghan authorities. So that's the second population. We also had a population of women. These are adult women that had been tried, convicted, and sentenced, and they were in jail. And in Afghanistan at that time, any women who were sentenced to jail that had children whose families were no longer available, or who had shunned them, or were all dead, the children went with them to jail. So we had to deal with a child population. So we had a number of children under the age of 12 that were with their mothers. Another segment of the population was underage boys. These are boys from the age of 12 up to about 18. And they were in another unit. So we had 5 different separate populations that we had to deal with from a physical isolation perspective, and also from program delivery and refurbishing. So there was physical redevelopment of the jail and work being done all the time. Now, I think you had alluded to that there were many other different parts of the Canadian effort in Kandahar, and it was primarily done through the Kandahar Provincial Reconstruction Team at Camp Nathan Smith in Kandahar, Afghanistan. The PRT was indeed a Canadian whole-of-government effort, meaning Canadian Forces, Correctional Service Canada, Foreign Affairs International Trade at that time. It, of course, now is known as Global Affairs Canada, and also for the Canadian International Development Agency, CIDA. The RCMP took the lead hand in terms of policing, but there were many other police forces from across Canada involved. New Westminster Police, Halton Regional, Ottawa, Newfoundland Constabulary, etc., who were involved in providing civilian police or CivPol operation. So all of this took place within Camp Nathan Smith. Corrections Canada, like the other government agencies, worked under the Canadian Forces in terms of them providing all of our logistics, our transportation, and our protection. So whether we were on patrol, being relocated by vehicle or by air, our protection within the camp, wherever it is that we may go outside of the camp or outside the wire, as it were. Corrections Canada people were unarmed, so we always had a close protection detail, bodyguards, if you will, of several Canadian Forces soldiers who would look after us and keep us safe while we went through the jail and met with the prison leadership, as well as examining all of the facilities, interviewing inmates, and things like that.
It sounds like an enormous, enormous task, Randie, and you mentioned you had a team of people there to help you. But I also imagine that there were a number of local Afghans that were integral to your success in the mission. Can you tell me what impact the locally engaged staff had for you personally and for the work that you were doing in Afghanistan?
Okay. Generally, at Camp Nathan Smith, all of the different government departments, including the military, were heavily involved in working with locally employed Afghans. Locally employed Afghans helping to work alongside Canadian Forces, cooks preparing food, cleaning, doing maintenance, engineering tasks and things like that. But also for the people who provided the services for interpretation. And I'm not talking translation. We never ever wanted what we were saying to be translated. We needed it to be interpreted into something that conveyed what we meant, not what we were actually trying to say.
Right.
Or actually saying, rather. So these interpreters, program managers, cultural advisors, these are the people that helped us to actually get things going. They spoke Pashto as well as Dari, as well as English, and in many cases a multitude of other languages as well. And they were our means of communicating with all of our Afghan interlocutors that we were dealing with. And we were dealing with people at the local level. For example, in the prison system with the Central Prison Directorate, we dealt with the staff in the prison. We dealt with the staff from the provincial level. Remember, Afghanistan was comprised of 34 provinces, so there was a provincial element, and then there was a federal element with the Central Prison Directorate. So we were dealing with the local mayor, the governor of the province. We were dealing with the minister from Kabul, as well as the head of the Afghan Central Prison Directorate. So we interfaced with all of these individuals, having discussions with them, and helping them to understand what we were doing and how we were helping them to take over and to do things for them rather than us doing things for them.
Right. So of all the locally engaged personnel that you encountered and were on contract with your agency or the government of Canada, is there any one particular individual that stands out for you, or?
Well, there are a great many. I assure you, I can count probably 8 or 10 that I'm very, very close with even to this very day. There is one particular individual who has, in reality, has become the face of it. I know there was a global television documentary that was done on it, and it was the fellow who was in charge of the Afghan security cordon around Camp Nathan Smith. And it was a man by the name of Smiley. That was his nickname because he always smiled. But he became, he was a sergeant initially, and then he became a captain. His real name is Mohammed Ismail. And Mohammed looked after all of the Afghan security staff around Camp Nathan Smith and interacted with the Canadian Forces, who had responsibility for the actual perimeter wall and all of the checkpoints and things like that. So he was integral to the work that was being done inside the camp. We had also built a training center just outside the gates of the camp. It was a very large training area for weapons training, as well as classroom instruction and things like that. The end being that we would have prison staff, police, others, Afghan National forces staff come to the camp and receive training just outside the walls of the camp in this training center. Sergeant, then Captain Smiley, was integral was critically important in controlling all of the Afghan forces that were around the camp and making sure that all of the staff from the reconstruction team that were working outside the gate, outside the wire, were indeed safe. So he provided all of the necessary security and direction to his staff and liaised with corrections, the police, foreign affairs, international trade, development agency, visitors to the camp. Another critical contribution that he made, we had many, many different festivals and celebrations that the Afghans celebrated throughout a year. New Year, for example, Nowruz, Al-Fitid. That was a time when wealthy neighbors would look towards their more needy neighbors outside and would help to give them gifts. What this translated into in reality was Canada organizing quantities of oil and blankets and sugar and flour and rice and wind-up radios and things like this, and we would bring our local area neighbors around the camp into the camp, and then we would give them these collections of materials that they could take out. And Captain Smiley organized all of that kind of thing, provided all of the security, all of the transportation, all of the necessary oversight. He was doing so many different things, and we got to know him very, very well, and he was in and out of the camp many times a day. And we were in fact spending more time with him outside of work as well. It's a remarkable man.
So it becomes a friendship, in fact, probably a lifelong
friendship.
There
were many friendships, lifelong friendships that were forged in that very difficult set of circumstances that have lasted to this day. Mohammed Ismail, of course, is now in Canada. He's living in the Greater Toronto area.
So that brings me to about a year ago, where, of course, Afghanistan falls to the Taliban. Canada pulls out, the Allies pull out, and we're faced with this circumstance where, you have people like Mohammed, Captain Smiley, who are struggling to find their way out of country, trying to get some sort of help from the very friends and allies they made while we were there. Can you tell me a little bit about Mohammed, Captain Smiley's experience as he was trying to make his way out of country?
Well, when Captain Smiley and his family, his wife and his daughter, were living in Kandahar, they knew that the country was very quickly beginning to unravel after the release of those 5,000 Taliban fighters from the Bagram Air Base, as well as a number of other expansions within the country as the Taliban took over one province after another. He saw the writing on the wall, and he knew that he had to get his wife and his child out. Many other Afghans sensed exactly the same thing and took their own personal initiatives in trying to extricate themselves from the Kandahar area and to make their way to Kabul, where they believed Canada was going to be there and to help them to get out. That is, those individuals that had worked and provided such incredible service and support to the Canadian efforts while they were there. Now, Captain Smiley wound up abandoning his home and his nice vehicle, went into another vehicle, and made his way going the back route over 495 kilometers to Kabul. He finally made his way there, and I was in touch with him many times over the years, and almost daily or every 2 days while he was traveling his way virtually northward to get to Kabul, and trying to avoid all of the very serious Taliban checkpoints that were being set up. And there were active hunting missions taking place on the part of the Taliban that were hunting out Afghans that had served Canada so well, and their lives became forfeit. Many of them were visited by the Taliban, promised that they would be safe and their families would be safe, only to have them murdered in the middle of the night.
Tragic.
And a note saying this is what happens to traitors nailed on their door. So Captain Smiley was making his way up to Kabul, and as he got to Kabul, he had his family just slightly on the outskirts of the main city, and then he proceeded to the Kabul International Airport, where he understood that's where Afghans that had worked for Canada should be trying to gather and to make connections with Canadian representatives there.
And this is that very scene that so many of us saw, I think, on television with it must have been thousands of Afghans clamoring at the walls of the airport, soldiers up on top from various nations, and in certain cases being overrun and that sort of thing. This is that very scene.
Well, this is all through that period, and I was talking to him many times a day. This was done in a very secure fashion by using a secure means of communication, such as WhatsApp and some others, where he would load it onto his phone, he would make the call, and then erase everything from his phone, so he didn't have any records of it, should he be apprehended by the Taliban and interrogated for anything. Right. So yes, he was there during that very tumultuous series of days as all of the NATO forces were withdrawing from Afghanistan. Certainly he watched the giant aircraft take off, that horrific yet iconic view of that huge jet taking off with people falling from the underside of the aircraft. Incredible. As they tried to cling to it. I was actually on a telephone call or a video call with him when that massive explosion took place at the Kandahar International Airport, and this giant mushroom cloud, and the ground shook, and the explosion occurred, and the sound wave rolled over, and what's happening? And he turns his phone, and I'm watching this mushroom cloud, sail up into the sky. Incredible. And people are screaming, and there's pandemonium everywhere. And he was actually standing in a sewage canal beside an overflowing footpath on the outside of the perimeter of the airport at the time, and he very quickly knew that he needed to move from that area to another area outside the airport. Subsequently, he and his wife and family had made their way to a home, a safe house, if you will, that had been established by the Canadian Veterans Transition Network. Many other families were there as well, and I was in touch with him many times during the day. I get calls at night, concerned, Taliban outside, people peering out through the glass, just trying to assure him that he was doing everything that he could and trying to give him some support and understanding. So he felt free enough to call me and to share these concerns. He was a very proud man, and he wanted to appear, very much in control and protective of his family, but he was also enduring tremendous, concern and apprehension, not only for his family but for all of the other Afghans that were with him. I was talking to him on his phone as he swept the video across the room, and I saw, a dozen different people that I had worked with over there that had supported us so tremendously, and they were all living in this safe house in fear, hoping to get a phone call from the Canadian Embassy or some other representative to get to the airport in order to be extracted.
Right.
It happened to some, but not nearly enough. Over time, Captain Smiley was able, through the support of the Veterans Transition Network, to make his way, that is his way, he, his wife, and his son, to make their way out of Kabul and heading eastward toward Pakistan. And there's only one road that will lead in to through Afghanistan to the east into Pakistan. And it was over that road that this particular vehicle had to travel and made it through a couple of different checkpoints miraculously. and eventually got into Jalalabad and then into a safe place within Pakistan. And once he had made it there and he was free and clear, then he phoned me, and quite frankly, the pair of us cried together in joy that he and his wife and his son had actually made it. They knew there were many other things in front of him, but we maintained contact throughout his time in Pakistan, and also once he was on his way to Canada, and indeed after he arrived here.
So it sounds to me a lot like you were kind of his moral support, his telephone guardian angel, kind of helping him through the journey from Kandahar all the way to Pakistan, and then of course to Canada.
Well, that is true, and his attention was primarily on his family, to keep them safe and to get them out. We were also working together with a number of other Afghans who had worked for the Canadians in Kandahar, who had destroyed all of their documentation, all of their proof of having worked with Canada,
right.
Certificates, employment records, anything like that, lest they be found in possession of these things at a Taliban checkpoint, in which case their lives would have been forfeit. Once they were in this safe house, they were now being required by the Canadian Embassy to provide proof that they had worked for Canada. Well, in order to do that, I was working with Captain Smiley in identifying a number of the Afghans that had worked with a variety of international foreign affairs officers, Canadian forces, police, Development Agency, Corrections Canada, and we would put them in touch with a network of returned soldiers, police, diplomats, etc., so that they could get in direct contact and provide them the letters of attestation that could be sent electronically to them, so that they could pick it up on their respective smartphones when they loaded the application in and retrieved it from another location.
Right.
So helping people to get connected, to get the necessary proof, to achieve the support necessary for Canada to get them out. Yeah, and many were successful at getting out, but there's a great many that are still there.
Incredible. And you're still doing some work with Afghans who have repatriated here to Canada as part of what sounds like an extension of the network you've just described. Do you want to share a little bit about what that is all about?
Well, yes, certainly. There were many Afghans that had arrived in the Vancouver area. Pardon me, that had arrived in the greater Vancouver area, and I had connected with a number of other Afghans that had already been here since around 2010, and I enlisted their assistance and at helping to put together a receiving assistance, if you will, for Afghans and their families who came to the area. There was one Afghan who also was another interpreter, and his name was Mohammed Hassan Khan, and he had come in 2010, and he was instrumental in helping me to set up a network in the Surrey area that allowed some relief work for the various Afghan refugees that arrived within the area. We made arrangements through a fellow who was a spiritual advisor to them. It was a community center where they could go, they could have their Islamic religious procedures and things like that, as well as have a central place for the receiving of food donations and clothing and appliances and furniture as these people began to get established and finding places to live, helping them to get into English as second language courses for their family members, etc., and helping them to get established and to help them to decompress from what they had come out of. And indeed, most all of them had very traumatically left loved ones behind as they successfully fled the country.
Wow. You know, it sounds to me, an awful lot, Randie, like what the work you've been doing and the work that folks involved in the Veterans Transition Network and others who have served Canada in Afghanistan. It sounds an awful lot like you are illustrating exactly what it is, Mark. The theme for the walk is, and that's leave no one behind. And you're literally putting your money where your mouth is, which is incredible. And I think it makes me very proud to be a part of the Canadian Walk for Veterans, to be here having the opportunity to speak with both of you about it. Mark, for folks who want to get involved, for folks who want to register and walk, where can they go, and maybe talk a little bit more about where the walk is taking place?
Well, you bet, Christian, thank you. But I want to say something before I get to that, and that's, you brought up, this whole interview brings up a very important part, is that, it's called the Canadian Walk for Veterans, but there's a lot of people who have served Canada and served Canada overseas. I bet a lot of Canadians aren't aware that we had someone from corrections over there serving and working shoulder to shoulder with our troops. So the Canadian Walk for Veterans is for all those who serve Canada as veterans, as corrections, and what you do is for a living, border services too. So first responders, ambulance, the paramedics, the police, you're all there to keep us safe. And when we're running away from danger, you're running towards danger. And so that's what the Canadian Walk for Veterans is all about, is just an opportunity to say thank you. Hear stories like we just heard today from Randie, because they're amazing stories. There's thousands of amazing stories out there. And you know what? The Canadian public needs to know it, and they want to know it. So getting back to participating, so the Canadian Walk for Veterans is being held in 11 cities across the country. Over the weekend of September 24th and 25th, depending on the city that it's in. And it's being held virtually, so if a person can't make it to one of those cities, then they can actually register at www.Canadian Walk for Veterans. Click on the virtual, and you can walk where you want, when you want.
That's .com.
.com, sorry.
Walkforveterans.com. Canadian Walk for Veterans. So remember that. It's www.CanadianWalkForVeterans.com.
Yeah, sorry about that. And what we ask is that people share it, take a picture or a video and share their experience on walk day, and it kind of brings us all together. If we can't be together physically, then we can be together virtually and share the pictures and the videos together. So the cities we're in are Courtenay, BC on Vancouver Island, White Rock, BC, Abbotsford right here, and I'm very proud of the fact that you, Christian, will be the team leader for organizing the Abbotsford Canadian Walk for Veterans right here at Mill Lake in Centennial Park, Abbotsford. We're in Kamloops, BC, Edmonton, Sylvan Lake, which is right around Red Deer, kind of midway between Calgary and Edmonton. There's a walk in Calgary. We're in Prince Albert, Saskatchewan, Kingston, Ontario, Phillipsburg, Quebec, and Halifax.
So truly coast to coast.
It's truly coast to coast, and we invite all Canadians to take just as my friend Terry Kelly would say, just take a pittance of time, just to take a moment and reflect on those that have put their lives at risk, face challenges for the rest of their lives, so that we have the wonderful place that we call home here in Canada, where we can raise our children in safe and secure environment and enjoy the lifestyle we have here in Canada. So I want to thank you, Randie. Thank you for your work, and thank you for your service to Canada. Same to you, Christian. Thank you for your service, and thank you for holding this interview today.
Well, you're stealing my thunder, Mark. It's a common practice on my show that I take with all of my guests to thank them for their service. It sometimes can be said over much, but it's something that I feel very sincerely about. Service is a calling. It's a noble calling, and not everyone is called to it. But Randie, you've served Canada for 35 years as a correctional professional, and obviously spent some of that time in Afghanistan, serving this great nation there. And Mark, you continue to serve to this day with this terrific organization and trying to bring light to much needed stories and much needed awareness around people who do serve, and I think that's noble. So I thank you both for your service. I thank you both for being guests on the show, and I am truly honored, and the Team 10-8 podcast is truly honored to be a part of the walk and to bring the walk to Abbotsford, BC on Saturday, September 24th. Again, to register, www.canadianwalkforveterans.com. Be sure to jump on the registration page. Register where you can. If you've got a walk in a city near you, wherever you're listening or watching from. And if you want to walk virtually, hit that register button, sign up, and get your commemorative challenge coin, and send some pictures in, so we all know that you're out supporting this truly worthy cause. Thank you, gents, very much. Appreciate your time, and again, thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Thank you.